Senator, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Barry. Good morning, everybody else. Karen, Malcolm, Michael.
We'll start with the poker machine debate now. And given that the extent of the problem gambling in this country, why has it taken so long to have a national debate?
I think that if we invented poker machines today, we wouldn't have them. They would be banned. But they're there, and a lot of places rely on them. A lot of places rely on them for income streams, especially in regional towns, where they are instrumental in delivering a whole heap of services, such as sporting fields, venues to the town. But no one likes the mess of someone who sits in the corner and puts the family's savings or the family's income down the slot. And I think everybody acknowledges that. There's no argument about that. There's a parliamentary inquiry that's going to come out about this, and we'll hope that the parliamentary inquiry will be acted on. I think there's general consensus that there has to be, at the very least, be a voluntary capacity for people to put a limit on how much they can bet. And, the debate's at foot, and let's see where the parliamentary inquiry goes.
Now, what about that idea, though, that you set a limit before they bet and they're forced to stay within that limit? What's wrong with that idea?
Well, I suppose it's a case of how's it going to work. I mean, I'm not fully across the details of how exactly that would work. What I do know is that a lot of people have paid a lot of money for poker machines, and if you start removing the capacity for them to earn money from a federal sphere, then I suppose the federal government, as the Constitution allows, will have to compensate those clubs for it. So there's a whole heap of aspects to this debate that have to be considered. Now, the state governments have been out there making literally hundreds of millions, I would suggest billions of dollars of revenue out of these things. So everybody has got their hands on the sticky paper on this one. I think there's a general feeling that something has to be done. We have to start at least curbing the excesses of people who've done their dough through clubs and pubs. I don't think everybody likes them who makes money out of them, but everybody who sees them has an unerring feeling that there's something not quite right going on there.
And do you think you can curb those excesses without really having a major impact on the clubs and the pubs that employ so many people?
Well, if what they say there's only a small proportion of people who are the problem, then I suppose it's not going to be sort of an issue. It's a self-defeating argument for them if they say the people who are causing the problem and the people who have a major problem, the one who generate most of the money for them. If that's the case, then really it's a moral question for all of us. They have to argue that the vast majority of people don't have a problem, and the vast majority of people it's money that they can afford to spend, and that's where the majority of the funds come from. But if we see that the majority of the funds are coming from people who have an addiction, then that's almost an immoral form of income stream, isn't it?
Yeah, because the Productivity Commission's figures say that 4% of the population use these things, 15% of those are problem gamblers, but of that 15%, they make up 40% of the total gambling on poker machines. So if you made a really serious impact on the problem gambler, it's going to eat into their revenue.
Yeah, well, there comes the question to those people who have bought the machines. They will certainly be sticking up their hands saying, well, we bought the machine, so we expect to be compensated for it. Regional towns will be saying, well, how do we actually provide the services which the government has absconded from providing, and now this form of gambling provides it for us. And the federal government will have to answer the question, well, if we remove this, we'll have to compensate. And so these are a number of issues for the parliamentary inquiry to discuss, and I, like everybody else, will be very interested in what they come up with.
Now, as you travel around the bush, is this as big an issue as the carbon tax?
No, the carbon tax leaves it for dead. The carbon tax is just infuriating people. They just can't get it. It's like the errant teenager who just won't listen to the word no. And now we hear the compensation package, Barry, and that's like the person saying, I'm going to set fire to your house, but don't worry, I'm going to call the fire truck to come and put it out for you. Why set it on fire in the first place? And everybody goes back to this basic fundamental principle. This tax is going to do nothing to the climate. The climate will, whether it's getting warmer, colder, staying the same, whether there's global warming, not global warming, whatever your views are, there is one absolute fact that this tax is going to do nothing to the climate. It will definitely mean that people lose their jobs, and I think that Mr Conway and Ms Gillard should listen to their coalition colleague Senator Dr. Bob Brown from the Greens, who says the jobs will be lost. Now, they might try the weasel words of, I will replace them with green jobs, but I don't think anybody is going to be wanting to be sweeping parks when formerly they were a fitter and turner in a steelworks. I don't think any person in regional Australia or in urban Australia is anything but absolutely furious that we are going down this path of this nauseating debate where we're being moralised to, made feel guilty, and then made to swallow a tax by reason of a government that broke its word. It's just not going to work. The more the Labor government pursue this issue, the more they are peeling off their own people. And I'd have to say to Mr Paul Howes, he's had a dramatic turn of fortune lately. He seems to be listening to his own membership. Paul, quite obviously jobs are going to be lost. It would be insane to suggest that jobs aren't going to be lost. You can't put up the major driver of an economy, which is the price of power, to make us less competitive than our overseas counterparts in Southeast Asia or in Europe, and not expect there to be some ramifications in that jobs are lost. And they're going to be your jobs that are lost, Paul.
Well, if Paul Howes, though, sounds like he might be signing up to Tony Abbott's revolution. You might find yourself marching alongside his trade union members.
Well, I think, I looked on the CFMEU website the other day, Barry, and they don't want the carbon tax. Now, I hardly see the CFMEU as some sort of underground movement for the National Party. So, it's just a wide consensus across the community. And the other day when we had Labor Party people parading out the front of Parliament, calling people Dungeons and Dragons fantasists, oddballs, that other audience, rednecks. Well, you saw the result in the New South Wales state election. People will not be spoken to from sort of the pulpit of morality from the Labor Party that this tax is somehow good for them when it's never going to do anything to the climate. It'll definitely put jobs at risk. And most importantly, there are people, Barry, who are already doing it tough, who can't afford power as it is, who can't afford fuel as it is, who are struggling with the everyday fundamentals of life as they are, and they just go into hyperspace when you suggest a new tax to make them dearer.
But you say that there's consensus across the community. It wasn't so long ago that your party, the National Party, was the only party that was opposed to an ETS. The Liberals now, are they permanent converts?
Well, I can't help it if that, if we're the forefront of philosophical change, Barry. It's part of the National Party's dictum. But, what I can say is people at the start were made to feel guilty. They were made to say, there was just a statement made to them. You must accept this or you are somehow of a moral lesser character than everybody else. And over a period of time, Barry, they've now looked into the details of this and asked some fundamental questions. What exactly are they intending to do? Who is going to administer this? Is this going to be the same people administering this who administered ceiling insulation and administered the school hall debacle, and it's got us $198.2 billion in gross debt? Are they the people who apparently are going to cool the planet? And how does this affect my life? And the answer to that is, if you've got a power point in your house, if you use power, if you use concrete, if you use steel, if you have a job in an emission-intensive industry, you are going to be affected. And Australia has this innate pride that we want to be a country that makes things and grow things. A country that can't make things or grow things becomes a country that has nothing really to offer the world. And what this tax is takes us to a position where we become nobodies, and we don't like that.
Do we also want to lead the world in creating a dirty environment? Because that's what the figures suggest.
Oh, but Barry, this is absurd to think that somehow from Australia we are the pendulum of political thinking. It's ridiculous. If we want to go on unilateral crusades, then why don't we go on one to have regime change in North Korea, and then we can remove Robert Mugabe, and then we can single-handedly rid the world of malaria. All these things are noble gestures, but they are merely gestures because you know full well you can't do them. And might I say that they may be far more easier to achieve than single-handedly cooling the planet from a room in Canberra.
Okay, I want to ask you about state politics in Queensland. Are you relaxed about the Campbell-Newman rather unorthodox push to be Premier?
Well, Queensland is known for being unorthodox. I suppose I'm a representation of that lack of deliberation that sometimes comes into things. But what we have is something that's been widely accepted by the Queensland community. They see Campbell as a person who's got proven political acumen. They realise, and I hope my colleagues realise, that this is a ship and the ship has been launched, and if you think you have a better future in the sea with the sharks, well, good luck. The people of Queensland will be furious if this does not come to its fruition. And I think that Campbell, has an extremely good chance, not a perfect chance, but an extremely good chance of showing to Queensland an alternative form of government, which they haven't had for basically a quarter of a century, except for 2 years under Rob Baldridge and Joan Sheldon, and they were very tenuous. So people in general will be furious if this does not, become fulfilled, because they want that change.
But some of your colleagues, though, in the National Party at the state level have spoken about the impact on parliamentary democracy, or the principle of it, that it gives unelected party officials control over elected MPs. Does that concern you?
Well, no, it doesn't, Barry, because let's go through it. First of all, what's so vitally different about this, or fundamentally different about this, is that Campbell Newman has to receive the endorsement of the people of Ashgrove, so they can knock it on the head straight away if they really wanted to. And then, likewise, it has to be the endorsement of the people of Queensland at a state election. And then, likewise, there has to be the endorsement, and at any time, the endorsement of his colleagues within the party room. Now, this is an entirely different proposition to what Julia Gillard did when she brought in a carbon tax, where she said one thing, delivered a different outcome after the election. We're telling the people of Queensland precisely what we intend to do prior to the election, and it is their right to make a decision or otherwise at the election.
OK, a couple of quick issues. This whole concept of women in combat roles, it seems that's going to go ahead.
Well, I see this. Obviously, what happened with that lady at ADFA was abhorrent. But let's not confuse that when you're in the military, you're not working for KPMG. It is the military. It is not Civvy Street, as they say. In the military, they're training people, unfortunately, to kill people. And when you're given an F-88 Steyr with a 5.56 or 5.36 millimetre round, then these things are designed to put you in a very peculiar position in your life, in that you were designed and trained and expected to kill and maim other people. Now,
but that doesn't in any way justify what happened to her, though, does it?
Not in no way, shape or form does it justify it. But I think that sometimes that there's an overlapping desire to make the military like Civvy Street, and it's not like Civvy Street, it is actually the military. And I suppose the first question that needs to be asked, as well as this lady finds justice, as she's entitled to, is, I'm sure when I had a brief involvement with the military, there was a thing about fraternisation, but between the sexes in the ranks, and that's not supposed to happen. So these are some of the problems that happens when that does.
And what about the question of women in combat roles?
Well, I can only look at this personally. I just couldn't get my head around shooting a woman. Maybe that makes me a bit old-fashioned, and I imagine other people get themselves in the same position. Nor would I like to see a lady shot. And so that, for me personally, makes me slightly uncomfortable with it. If I'm happy to go to a position of biomechanics that, if anything, you've got to realise that it's no one's, fighter jets don't get parking tickets, and guns and rifles are designed to shoot people, and it's all about the biomechanics and the horrible stark reality of the battlefield, that if you're on it, you better be able to do everything that's asked of you and more. Otherwise, you're putting yourself and all those around you at risk.
And just finally, the government has confirmed with Bob Brown that they will be setting up an inquiry to establish permanent rules for debates in federal elections. Now, Bob Brown, there's a good chance that he'll be on the panel next time around. How would the Nationals feel about that?
We'll be absolutely delighted as long as we're there with them. I mean, the reality is that we have just as many senators as Bob Brown. At the last state election, the National Party stood in 20 seats, won 18. Bob Brown, by the way, is on 42.5% more money than me. He seems to sneak round that one whenever he's parading on about parliamentary pay. Yeah, of course I have. And so do you, Barry. I bet you know what you're getting paid. Bob Brown, if he's got a right to the podium to express the views of the Greens, then certainly the National Party has a right to the same podium, and I'm sure the Australian people would want us there. I mean, we have been leading the debate on such things as ETS. We're the ones with they made a public statement about making sure the Singaporean Stock Exchange did not merge with the Australian one. I know Michael doesn't agree with me on that, but we have quite a few things to say and deserve exactly the same rights as Bob to say them.
Except that you're in a formal coalition with the Liberals. The Greens are not in a formal coalition with Labor.
Oh, come on, Barry, you don't believe that. I mean, you tell me how many times Adam Branson and I have voted with the government. I remember the happy smiley photo of Bob Brown and all the Greens signing the book with Julia Gillard. I remember the media announcement with you know, Bob and Julia and Rob, Oshot and Tony Windsor all standing out the front. I mean, that is the government. It's the Green, Labor Party, independent government, the Glee Club. They are the government and we're the opposition, and we're going to try and change them.
Thanks for your time this morning.
You're welcome.